They told us it would take 3 days, maybe 4. We took Peleliu in 73 days. Cost us nearly 10,000 casualties. And you know what? We didn't even need the damn island. But I'm getting ahead of myself. September 15th, 1944. I was a corporal in the 1st Marine Division, K Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, 21 years old, from a small town in Pennsylvania, volunteered right after Pearl Harbor. By 44, I'd already seen Guadalcanal, Cape Gloucester. Thought I'd seen everything the Pacific could throw at us. Peleliu taught me I hadn't seen anything yet. The island was supposed to be a stepping stone. MacArthur needed it for his return to the Philippines, or so they said. 8 square miles of coral rock in the Palau Islands, held by about 11,000 Japanese troops. Intelligence told us the pre-invasion bombardment would soften them up. Told us the Japs were demoralized, that they'd probably surrender once we hit the beaches. Intelligence was wrong about everything. I remember the briefings on the ship, looking at maps, aerial photos of the island. White beaches, some scrub jungle, a ridge system running along the north side. Didn't look that bad on paper. Nothing we hadn't dealt with before. 3 days, maybe 4, the captain said. Then we're back on the ship heading to the Philippines. The guys were joking around, playing cards, writing letters. Some of the replacements were nervous. This was their first landing. The veterans like me, we tried to calm them down. Stick close, keep your head down, you'll be fine. I wish I'd been honest with them. Wish I'd told them that some of them wouldn't make it off the beach, that the ones who did would spend the next 2.5 months in hell. The night before the landing, I couldn't sleep. Lay in my bunk, listening to the ship's engines, the sound of men breathing in the dark. My buddy Tommy Chen was in the bunk above me. Chinese kid from San Francisco, funny as hell, always had a joke or a story. We'd been through everything together since Guadalcanal. You scared? He asked me in the darkness. Nah, I lied. Just another island. Yeah, he said, just another island. Neither of us believed it. You develop a sense after a while, an instinct. Something about this one felt different, felt wrong. We hit the beach at 0832 hours the next morning, and I learned what hell actually looks like. Part 2. Battle begins, approximately 500 words. The Amtraks churned through the water toward the beach. We were packed in tight, 30 guys in each one, rifles between our knees, trying to stay small. The naval bombardment was supposed to be the heaviest of the war. 3 days of shells pounding the island. As we got closer, I could see smoke rising, fires burning. Looked like the whole island was destroyed. It wasn't enough, not even close. The first Amtraks hit the beach, and the Japanese opened up. Artillery, mortars, machine gun fire. They'd hidden their positions in the coral ridges, survived the bombardment, waited for us to get close. It was a killing field. Our Amtrak made it to the beach. The ramp dropped, and we poured out into chaos. The sand wasn't sand, it was coral, sharp as knives, tore right through your boots. And it was hot. Jesus Christ, it was hot. Must have been 115, 120 degrees, maybe hotter. Machine gun fire was kicking up the coral around us. Men were going down before they made it 10 feet. I ran toward a shell crater, dove in, and found 3 other Marines already there. One of them was hit, bleeding from his shoulder, cursing a steady stream. "Where are they?" someone shouted. "Where the hell are they shooting from?" Everywhere. That was the answer. The Japanese had turned the whole island into a fortress. Every cave, every ridge, every piece of coral had a gun position. You couldn't see them until you were right on top of them. We had to cross the beach and take the airfield. That was the objective for day 1. The airfield was maybe 400 yards inland, but it felt like 400 miles. We moved in rushes, sprinting from cover to cover while mortars rained down and machine guns tracked our every move. Tommy Chen was right beside me. We made it to a knocked-out Japanese pillbox, pressed against the coral. "This is bad," he yelled over the noise. "This is really bad." He was right. The beach behind us was carnage, burning Amtraks, wounded men everywhere, corpsmen trying to help under fire. The Japanese had pre-sighted every inch of that beach. They knew exactly where we'd land, and they were ready. We pushed forward. Had to. Staying on the beach meant dying on the beach. My squad made it to the edge of the airfield by late afternoon. We'd lost 5 men getting there. The airfield was a moonscape, cratered, smoking, littered with destroyed equipment. And past the airfield, I could see them. The ridges, Umabrogel Mountain, though we'd start calling it something else soon enough. A jumble of coral peaks and valleys covered in vegetation, riddled with caves. The Japanese were up there watching us, waiting. That's when I understood. This wasn't going to be 3 days. This was going to be a siege, a war of attrition. They weren't going to surrender. They were going to make us pay for every foot of coral with blood. By nightfall of the first day, we'd taken the airfield. But we'd lost over 200 men killed, more than 1,000 wounded. And we'd barely scratched the surface. The second day, they sent us toward the ridges. That's when we learned what kind of fight this was going to be. The Japanese had spent months fortifying Peleliu. They'd built a network of caves in the coral, connected by tunnels. They could fire on you from one position, then disappear into the rock and pop up somewhere else. You couldn't see them, couldn't predict where they'd hit you from. It was like fighting ghosts. And the heat. God, the heat was its own enemy. The coral absorbed the sun and radiated it back at you. There was almost no shade, no water except what you carried. Men were collapsing from heat exhaustion before they even saw combat. We'd go through our canteens in an hour, and there was no resupply. You had to choose between dying of thirst or dying from Japanese bullets. The coral itself was a nightmare. Razor-sharp edges everywhere. You'd take cover and slice your hands open. You'd slip and gash your knees, your elbows. Every cut would get infected in the heat. By the third day, half the company had some kind of coral infection, wounds that wouldn't heal, turning septic. We started going into the caves. That was the worst. You'd throw grenades in, wait for the explosion, then go in with flashlights and rifles. The caves went back sometimes 50, 100 feet into the coral. Twisting passages, side chambers, dead ends. The Japanese would be waiting in the dark, and you'd walk right into them. I lost Tommy Chen in a cave on the 4th day. We were clearing a position on the lower slopes of the ridge. Found a cave opening, threw in grenades, thought we'd got them all. Tommy went in first with his flashlight. I heard him shout, then gunfire. By the time I got in there, he was down. Japanese soldier had been hiding in a side chamber, waited until Tommy passed, shot him in the back. I killed the Japanese soldier, emptied my whole rifle into him. Then I sat there in the dark with Tommy while he died. He kept trying to say something, but the blood was filling his lungs. I held his hand, told him it was okay, that he'd be fine, knowing he wouldn't be. He died in that cave. We had to leave him there, couldn't carry him out, had to keep moving. I don't even know if they ever recovered his body. That was September 19th, 4 days into a 3-day battle. The fighting became routine in a sick way. Wake up before dawn, move forward into the ridges, fight all day in the heat, pull back at night, do it again the next day. Every day we'd gain maybe 50 yards. Every day we'd lose more men. Artillery, mortars, machine guns, snipers, cave fighting. Death came in 1,000 ways. The Japanese didn't retreat, didn't surrender. They'd fight until they were dead, and sometimes even after. We learned to put 2 rounds in every body we passed because the corpses might be booby-trapped. Or the dead soldier might have a grenade waiting. They'd come out at night sometimes, infiltrate our lines. You'd be on watch, and suddenly there'd be a Japanese soldier in your foxhole with a bayonet. Or they'd come in waves, screaming, trying to overrun our positions. We'd fight them off, and in the morning you'd count the bodies. The smell was unbearable. Rotting corpses in the heat, sometimes buried in shallow graves by shell explosions, then exposed again. The smell of death was everywhere. You couldn't eat, couldn't breathe without tasting it. By the end of September, we'd lost nearly half the division, and we still hadn't taken the main ridge complex. They started calling it Bloody Nose Ridge. That was being polite. October was more of the same. Day after day of grinding up those ridges into those caves, bleeding for every position. The 1st Marine Division was shot to pieces. They brought in the 81st Infantry Division to help. Fresh troops, but they learned quick what kind of hell they'd walked into. Peleliu didn't care if you were a veteran or a replacement. It killed everyone the same. We developed tactics, flamethrowers for the caves, burn them out when grenades wouldn't work, bulldozers to seal caves shut, burying the Japanese alive, artillery support, close air support, naval gunfire. We threw everything at those ridges. The Japanese adapted. They'd wait until we were right on top of a cave, then open up at point-blank range. They'd rig explosives, collapse tunnels on our men. They'd use the network of caves to appear behind us, cut off our advances. I got hit in early October. Mortar fragment took a chunk out of my leg. They evacuated me to the beach aid station, patched me up, and 3 days later, I was back in the line. We didn't have enough men to keep anyone in the rear. I barely recognized my company. Most of the guys I'd landed with were dead or evacuated. The replacements looked like children, scared, sunburned, bleeding from coral cuts. They'd looked to us veterans for leadership, but what could we tell them? Don't die isn't much of a strategy. The battle became almost abstract. You stopped thinking about winning, about objectives, about the strategic importance of the island. You just focused on survival. Make it through today. Make it through this hour. Don't be the next one to catch a bullet. We took the ridges piece by piece, would capture a cave system, declare it secure, then the Japanese would pop up again from tunnels we didn't know existed. We'd have to clear the same ground twice, 3 times. It was maddening. The Japanese commander, Colonel Nakagawa, he was brilliant in a terrible way. He'd abandoned the traditional Japanese tactics of banzai charges and fighting to the last man on the beaches. Instead, he'd turned Peleliu into a maze of death, designed to bleed us dry. And it was working. By mid-October, we'd been fighting for a month. A full month on an island that was supposed to take 3 days. The 1st Marine Division was combat ineffective. We'd taken over 6,500 casualties. They finally pulled us off the line, sent us back to Pavuvu for rest and refit. But the battle kept going. The Army's 81st Division stayed, kept fighting through October into November, kept clearing caves, kept dying in the coral, kept pushing forward. I was on a ship heading away from Peleliu when I heard the news. MacArthur had landed in the Philippines weeks ago, hadn't needed Peleliu at all. The whole battle had been unnecessary. We died for nothing. I broke on the ship, sat in my bunk, leg bandaged, listening to the guys talk about Pavuvu, about rest, about hot food and clean water, and something inside me just snapped. I started laughing. Couldn't stop. The other guys looked at me like I'd gone crazy. Maybe I had. We didn't need it, I kept saying between laughs. We didn't need the fucking island. A sergeant told me to shut up. I couldn't. The laughter turned into something else. Not crying exactly, but not crying either. I put my face in my hands and I couldn't stop shaking. They took me to the ship's doctor. He gave me something to calm down, asked me questions. How long had I been in combat? What had I seen? Was I having trouble sleeping? I wanted to tell him about Tommy Chen dying in that cave, about the smell of burning human flesh from the flamethrowers, about the Japanese soldier I'd found in a cave, wounded, and how I'd shot him instead of calling for a corpsman because I was too tired to care anymore, about how every time I closed my eyes I saw coral and blood and broken bodies. But I just sat there, couldn't find the words. He diagnosed me with combat fatigue, said I needed rest, said I'd be fine after some time away from the front. He was wrong. I wouldn't be fine. None of us would be. On Pavuvu, they tried to rebuild the division. New replacements came in, fresh-faced kids who hadn't seen Peleliu. The survivors were different from them. We were different from everything. We'd sit around not talking, just staring at nothing. The 1,000-yard stare, they called it. I couldn't sleep. When I did sleep, I'd wake up screaming, thinking I was back in the caves. The other guys understood. They were having the same nightmares. We got word in November that Peleliu was finally secured. November 27th. 73 days after we'd landed. The 81st Division had finally cleared the last cave systems. Colonel Nakagawa had committed ritual suicide. The battle was over. The butcher's bill, nearly 10,000 American casualties, almost 2,000 dead. The Japanese, all 11,000 killed, only a few hundred captured. An entire garrison wiped out. And for what? An island we didn't need. An airfield that wasn't important, a stepping stone to nowhere. The veterans started calling it the Forgotten Battle. Peleliu happened while Europe was celebrating the liberation of France, while the newspapers were full of stories about the drive toward Germany. Nobody cared about a tiny coral island in the Pacific. But we couldn't forget. We were branded by it. Those 73 days had changed us into something that couldn't come back. The battle was over, but Peleliu would never be over for us. I came home in the summer of 1945. War was over by then. Japan surrendered in August. I'd missed the invasion of Okinawa while recovering from Peleliu. Part of me felt guilty about that. Most of me was grateful. The town threw a parade for us returning veterans. Bands playing, people cheering, pretty girls kissing soldiers. Everyone was celebrating victory, the end of the war, the boys coming home. I stood in that parade in my dress uniform, medals on my chest, and felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. I was hollow inside. My parents had a welcome home dinner, family and friends, everyone wanting to hear war stories. What was it like, they'd ask. Were you scared? Did you kill any Japs? I gave them the answers they wanted. Talked about camaraderie, about doing our duty, about the importance of our sacrifice. Didn't tell them about Tommy Chen. Didn't tell them about the smell of burning flesh. Didn't tell them about shooting wounded men in caves because it was easier than taking prisoners. They couldn't have understood anyway. Nobody who wasn't there could understand. I tried to go back to normal life. Got a job at the steel mill, same place I'd worked before the war. Married my high school sweetheart, Sarah, in 1947. She was patient with me, bless her. Patient with the nightmares, the times I'd just shut down and couldn't talk, the way I'd hit the ground whenever I heard a loud noise. We had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. I watched them grow up, and I was there, physically present. But part of me was still on Peleliu, still climbing those coral ridges, still clearing those caves. I couldn't talk about it, not to Sarah, not to the other veterans at the VFW hall. What was there to say? We all knew what we'd been through. Saying it out loud wouldn't change anything. I followed the news about the war in the Pacific, read the histories they were starting to write, learned that military analysts had concluded Peleliu was strategically unnecessary. MacArthur hadn't needed it. Nimitz hadn't needed it. We'd bled for an island that didn't matter. That's what broke my heart. Not the horror of the battle. I could live with that. War is hell. People die. I understood that. But dying for nothing? That was harder to accept. Tommy Chen died for nothing. All those boys died for nothing. We spent 73 days in hell for a piece of coral that the United States military bypassed and ignored. I see Tommy sometimes. Not really, but in my mind. Still 21 years old, that grin on his face. Still making jokes. Still talking about what he's going to do after the war. He never got to do any of it. Never got to go home. Never got to have a life. I got to live. Got a wife, kids, a house, a job. Got to see the world change. Got to watch my children grow. I'm grateful for that. But I also carry the weight of everyone who didn't make it. Why did I survive when they didn't? What made me special? 12 years later, I still don't have an answer. They say time heals all wounds. Maybe for some people. For us, for the survivors of Peleliu, time just puts distance between who we were before and who we became after. The wounds don't heal. They just become part of you. Sometimes when it's quiet, when I'm alone, I can still feel that coral under my boots. Still taste the dust and the heat. Still hear the sound of gunfire echoing off the ridges. I survived Peleliu, but Peleliu didn't let me go. We took that island in 73 days. Cost us everything we were, and we didn't even need the goddamn place.